Thank you. Thank you very much. Good afternoon to you. I know it's been a long day, so my job will be to keep you awake, especially if you also participated in the fire drill this night, like which some of us did, I guess, who were in the hotel. For the ones who don't know, we had a fire alarm at 2 in the morning. So yeah, so I guess everybody is tired. I will try to keep it simple. So in case you don't know what any of this is that is written here, don't worry, I will try to explain all of those things. I will explain what is coercion techniques, and I mean, Windows environments you will most probably know. Yeah, so it might be simple. Let's see about this. This is the things that I will present will be not really something new, just some things that are not so well known. But I'm a penetration tester, I'm an IT security consultant, I try to hack companies kind of, and I can see that this is still a problem. I can use it, I used it in the past to take over systems, to take over the domain, and actually it works very often because people kind of know that it exists, but not how to prevent against it correctly. Yeah, and in the end you will see that the fix is actually not so hard. It's something that we should have most probably already implemented, but we did not for one reason or another. So this is me. I'm Martin. I work at a research center actually called SBA Research. We are based in Vienna in Austria. But actually, I do not do research at all. We also have some people that do IT security consulting, who do penetration testing, red teaming, do trainings, basically everything that that companies want. We have some more technical people, like where I'm also a part of. We also have some people who do, this information security management, which, some of us maybe also do. And I'm also kind of a Windows person. Like, this is my specialty. This is why I'm here. I'm not so much a fan of this web application testing, but I guess you are most probably the same because this is why you're here. Yeah, what's the agenda for today? We will basically go over those 3 points. What is actually this coercion, in case you don't know? We will hack with it. I will actually demonstrate it, and I hope the demo gods will be good to us, because in the end we should be domain admin. And what to do about it, of course. So first stop, what the heck is coercion? This is, by the way, not a typo. This is me trying to be funny, so hopefully it works. Yeah, so as a non-native speaker, of course, I had to Google what is coercion, because I kind of knew, but anyways, this is a definition by Google. We are trying to force somebody to do something, by using force or threats. Of course, that doesn't really work with a computer. I cannot tell it, do this, or I will plug you out or something like this. But it's kind of similar. This is how it's called. Didn't come up with the term. So in Windows, we have a laser pointer here. This is us, the attacker now. And we can now try to coerce a Windows machine, in this case it's a domain controller, to connect to a server. Basically we tell it, hey, connect to this server down there. And the domain controller is, okay, sure, let me connect there using my credentials. It's a little bit boring so far. Let's make it more fun, let's upgrade it. Here we just add an net NTLM relay. So attacker again tells the domain controller, connect to somewhere. Just this time it's back to us. We relay this authentication by the domain controller to a server, and the server will see, okay, you're the domain controller, you have maybe some permissions here or not. But how can we do this? So there are various techniques that I will now show in detail for you to understand. So those are just some of them. There are 6. There might be more. You can see there are many. Some of them are fixed. Some of them have very specific preconditions, like they only work on the domain controller or on Exchange. And I will, at least the first one, I will go into detail about how it works. So let's go through all of them. So we have PetitPotam. There is no official logo, I think. This is generated with DALI. The little hippo in French. So what is this PetitPotam? It's something that was released or discovered by Lionel Schill. I hope I pronounced this correctly. I mispronounce names a lot because there are many French people and I don't really speak French. So this was discovered in 2021. And you might heard of it because it was used a lot in combination with the Active Directory certificate service, which we will see later. Anyways, if you want to look into it, go on this GitHub repo. It's quite a short Python code that is quite easy to understand. So what does it do? It basically uses this encrypting file system remote protocol, which is basically just a protocol. This is from the Microsoft documentation here, which is used for a machine to access encrypted files on a different machine. And this can be abused to tell this machine, hey, access this encrypted file there somewhere. Our example again, via the attacker. In this case, we tell the domain controller, or can be any other server actually, use this RPC method here, EFS RPC open file raw, and the file that you should open is on a different server. It's on server, on the server, and it's some file. This is the default. You can adapt this. So domain controller is connecting to the server using the credential, accessing these files. So this is how it works. Nothing complicated. This is also why this PetitPotam script is 500 lines, I think, with a library, but still, I will show it. I prepared a lab, quite a simple lab. It's a domain controller, a server, a Windows 11 machine, and a Kali Linux. We will only see the Kali Linux. Those will be in the background. And the important part here is all of those systems are up to date. Like, they are not like completely up to date, like I installed them 2 months ago or something, but it's server 2022. It's not like something extremely old. It's quite up to date. So let me show you how this works. So I already checked, but I think if anybody cannot see, I can enhance. You just raise your hand and I will make it bigger. So what I will now just show is how can we use PetitPotam to coerce the domain controller to connect back to us. To see the domain controller connecting back to us, we will need to listen somehow for a connection. And I like to do this with Responder. So in case you don't know Responder, Responder is just a tool which listens on various ports, starts kind of a mock service, and captures credentials. So we started this here on the right side. On the left side here, I will now start PetitPotam. To do this, I already downloaded it. It's here in the Coercion folder, petitpotam.py. We will need you can already see what I will type, but anyways, we will need a user account. In this case, it's any user account in the Active Directory. So we password sprayed or something and found a user account through some other method. It's basically a test user with a simple password. And in the Active Directory, which in our case is sbaresearch.lab. So what we will do now comes the interesting part, kind of. We will say to which machine should the coerced machine connect to and which machine to coerce. So the machine it should connect to is ours, which is, this one. I will autocomplete it. So which is this one. You can also see it here. This is our IP address. And we will tell the domain controller to connect back to us. So let's execute this. Attack worked. That's here, and we can also see here on the right that it worked. We have a NetNTLM v2 authentication from the domain controller. Let's see what we can do with this. Some screenshots, but it worked anyway. So what did we get? We got an NetNTLM v2 authentication from the domain controller, from the machine account, from the DC dollar account, which is practically impossible to crack. So we cannot do much here. I don't know if you know, but a machine account in Windows is very long, very random. It will be quite hard to crack, but we can relay it. And where we can relay it next will be the next section, because normally this account doesn't have permissions. You might now tell me, but this has been fixed. I mean, we saw this is a This is a vulnerability that was released in this is a technique which was released in 2021. But we saw it, it's on a kind of fully patched machine, so we can see here that if you Google it, you will find articles like this one from 2021 that Microsoft shares mitigations. And again, in 2022, Microsoft patched this vulnerability. And as it is so often with those vulnerabilities that are patched many times, they are not really patched. So is it patched? It's a little bit complicated. Let me summarize it. So the simple summary is 1 out of 14 RPC methods that are in PetitPotam at least has been patched. So we cannot use the 1 anymore, but we can use 13 others. So in my opinion, this is not really a patch. It doesn't really impede attackers. The other thing which was patched, which is a little bit worse for an attacker, is that unauthenticated RPC access is not allowed anymore. So we need any Active Directory user, which is generally not sufficient because people so everybody, I'm sure that every Active Directory has a password summer 2023 exclamation mark nowadays, or at least 90% of them. So yeah, there will be a way. We just have to find any password. There is a countermeasure, though. I don't wanna. Let me tell you that there's a countermeasure. There's a tweet by Benjamin Delpy. I'm very sorry if there are French people here. He proposed RPC filters as a way against this. You can read into it. I am a little bit, the thing is, I heard that this causes problems. Some people use it. Some people say they don't want to use it. The important thing is, if I, as a penetration tester, as a consultant, tell you do this and reference a tweet, I mean, from this guy who is one of the best, still, it's a little bit weird. It's not an official Microsoft recommendation, so use it at your own risk. So let's summarize this PetitPotam. It will, or so far, it doesn't look like it will be fixed. It's kind of a feature now. There's nothing going on anymore. But there are countermeasures against the impact, which I will show you in the end. And again, I promise you, this will not be something groundbreaking. This will be something that is already in your backlog. Next one, PrintBug. Again, created those myself. So we have PrintBug here. It's another Coercion technique. It's not the same as Print Nightmare, which you see on the right. What people sometimes confuse, because I tell them you're vulnerable, or you can use PrintBug in your environment. I tell them no, we fixed this Print Nightmare. So it's a little bit complicated. So what is PrintBug? It was discovered already in 2018 by Will Schröder, and I at least found no older coercion technique. If you know another one, please tell me. And was presented back then at DerbyCon. So again, it works over RPC. Here it works over this print system remote protocol. And it needs this print service to be available on the target, else it doesn't work, because you cannot use this print service remote protocol without the printer service. And this is also where the relation with Print Nightmare comes into play. Print Nightmare is something completely else. It's a print spooler vulnerability, which is about escalation of privileges, remote code execution, quite bad stuff, actually. So, I mean, if you were, most probably you have heard of it, because it was quite a big deal when it came out. So the mitigation was just before people had the printer spooler running on domain controllers, because it was there by default, or also in our environment, in our lab environment, it runs. But they decided to remove the print spooler because you do not need it on a domain controller, for example, which also kills the PrintBug. And in general, it's pretty much the same with PetitPotam. Both have not been fixed. The only thing is, PetitPotam is available in 90% of cases, whereas PrintBug, less, maybe 40% of cases. None of them have been fixed, all of them still work, but still the question is how can we use them to exploit stuff? So there are others, I said it before, I think I put 6 on this slide. We will quickly go over them. There is shadow curse. This has been patched. This worked over those shadow copy protocol. So this has been patched, we cannot use this anymore. Then we have DFS coerce, still works, but only against domain controllers. Another one, so you can see there are quite many. This has not been patched, this still works. Then we have the exchange push subscriptions, a thing which was patched. You should go to this GitHub repo and to Dirk Jan's blog post. It's very good. It basically tells you a lot of things about Exchange, so still a nice read, but the coercion technique doesn't work anymore, and it anyways only worked against Exchange. And then we have a last one that I will talk about today, Outlook elevation of privileges. I find the name is not so good, but anyways, this I put it here mostly because it's quite a new one. You can see it's from 2023, and it's a vulnerability in the Outlook client itself. It's a little bit different from the ones we talked about before because it deals with the coercion of a user account. Again, as far as I understand, it's not completely fixed. So I didn't try it myself, but this is what I heard, that there are some bypasses of the mitigation. And it basically works like this. So backstory is this. Some time ago, some engineer at Microsoft thought it would be a great idea to have the functionality in Outlook to send a meeting with a custom sound. And of course, this custom sound can be on a network share, maybe somewhere on the internet. So I guess nobody noticed this functionality until some Russian hackers, I think, thought this would be a good idea to exploit with the enemies. Anyway, so what would an attacker do? They would send an email and basically attach this sound or attach a link to this WAV file, which is on a different server, to this victim here. And the victim basically just runs Outlook, and Outlook receives this email and then tries to get this WAV file from this server here. So the Outlook would, or the Outlook client would let the user authenticate to this server here using the credentials of this user. In this case, user credentials, not machine account credentials. So this is quite bad, of course, because we are talking about user accounts. They could be cracked, like depending on your password strength, of course, but again, weak passwords can be cracked, and user passwords are definitely weaker than those very long, very random machine account credentials. The other difference to what we had before, this is really a vulnerability. This is a vulnerability in the Outlook client, and it might actually get fixed. I mean, it doesn't really look like it anymore because I haven't heard anything about it in the last 2 months, but let's see about that. So I have it here for you to see that there are also other coercion techniques, but this one will not be the main topic of today. We will talk more about machine accounts. Yeah, to summarize this first chapter up, we saw there are many coercion techniques, and they won't be fixed, at least it seems like to me, because we have this PrintBug, which is here since 2018. This is, what is it, 5 years now. I don't think that Microsoft all of a sudden will decide, yeah, let's fix those things. But to be honest, so far there is not much of an impact. We get this NTLM, this net NTLM authentication from a machine which we cannot crack. But yeah, stay tuned. This will be actually the next step. So how can we now use this to hack? There is a popular, let's sum it up what we can do. We can now coerce a computer to connect to anywhere or back to us and relay this. It will connect with the machine account of the computer, which has maybe some AD privileges attached. And it will do actually not only, but it will do net and TLM authentication. It can also do Kerberos. More on that later. And this cannot be cracked, or at least in our case, or if you know a way how we can crack machine account and net and TLM authentication, this would be great, or bad maybe, or yeah, do you understand? But it can be relayed. So this is what we will do now. So there are some ways what we can exploit using this. The popular one is, or not very well-known one, is AD certificate services. This was this big vulnerability with PetitPotam in 2021, which you most probably heard of and hopefully implemented the mitigations because it is not completely fixed. And then I will go into a little bit less known things, local admin privileges and unconstrained delegation. This I will show. There's also resource-based delegation, will not be the topic of today. This is quite a complicated thing, but maybe even more. I mean, those are the ones that I found or that I used normally in pen tests and so on, which is actually, it works quite well in pen tests at least. So there might be more that I didn't think of or that maybe are not yet discovered. So let's start with the first one, ADCS, Active Directory Certificate Service. There is a great paper by Will Schröder and Lee Christensen, which is called Certified Pre-Owned. It came out in 2021. And basically there in 150 pages, they describe how this Active Directory Certificate Service works. It's a very interesting read. I mean, you need some time, it's 150 pages, but it's very interesting and helps you understand how this service works. There are a few vulnerabilities or misconfigurations explained in there. One of them is called ESC8, and we will focus on this one, because this is the one we can exploit using these coercion techniques. So ESC8 is short for NTLM relay to ADCS HTTP endpoint, and this is something that we can exploit using a coercion technique, because again we can relay those authentications by the machines. And if you follow security news in 2021, you have heard of this because it was quite big. An attacker could basically just take over an Active Directory in minutes. I will explain it in the next few slides. So let me quickly show you how this attack worked, or still works, but normally the mitigations are in place. So I hope this is not too small. Again, we do our coercion here. The attacker basically coerces the domain controller back to the attacker and then relays this authentication from the machine account of the domain controller to the ADCS web service. ADCS web service is a service running on top of the AD certificate service, which is basically vulnerable to this relaying. The ADCS web service is then, okay, cool, you're the domain controller. Here, take a certificate for the domain controller. So now the attacker has a certificate for the domain controller. Question is, what can you do with this? With this certificate, you can now go to Kerberos, and Kerberos is like, there's a certificate, you can get a TGT, so a Kerberos ticket. And what can you do with the Kerberos ticket of the domain controller? You can sync hashes. So basically now the attacker just goes back to the domain controller, give me some hashes. This is quite a cool attack and quite a devastating one, as you might imagine. The good thing is now that we know how to mitigate it. So it's 2023, enough of history now. If not yet, if you haven't done it yet, implement the mitigations described by Microsoft here. Basically, you have to implement some mitigation so that this attack is not possible anymore. Also here, I think Microsoft is confusing a few things because they're talking a lot about PetitPotam, and also media talked a lot about PetitPotam, but this is actually not the problem. Not the coercion technique is the problem. the misconfiguration in your ADCS is the problem. So this is done. Yeah, just a summary of this. PetitPotam is not ESC8. One is a coercion technique that can be used for many things. We'll see later. And ESC8 is this relay to the ADCS. PetitPotam is not fixed or mitigated, at least as long as you didn't implement those RPC filters. Yeah, hopefully you implemented those mitigations, of course, because this ESC8 can also be implemented with other coercion techniques. But let's go to more interesting stuff, because this is something that was in the news quite a lot. So first thing, I said it before, machine accounts that are local admin to another machine account. Example like this one here, we have a server 1 here that is admin to server 2 here. And we again, the attacker does coercion of this machine account here, then relays it to this server 2. The server 2 will see, okay, this is the machine account of server 1. It is local admin, so let's grant local admin privileges to this attacker here. I mean, the server doesn't know, the server thinks it's server 1. Yeah, you might now ask me, this is a little bit stupid what you're showing us here. Why would anyone configure this? And is this common? I can answer both questions, yes, and like it's a common configuration, and Microsoft Configuration Manager. So if you read in the documentation of Microsoft Configuration Manager, or SCCM, I think this is how most people know it, the computer account of the primary site server and central administration site server requires local administrator rights on all site system servers. So most companies have this Microsoft Configuration Manager deployed, so most companies have this configuration. If you want to find this out, like this is not, of course, there can also be other misconfigurations. You can, yeah, you can also just misconfigure it because you did something wrong or whatever. If you want to find out that if you have this, I have 2 Bloodhound queries here. I'm not so good at writing the Cypher queries, but this is what I came up with. Basically, the first one is a computer member of a group that is admin to another computer, or is a computer directly admin to another computer. Yeah, in our lab, it's a little bit constructed, but it's a lab, of course. The domain controller is a member of the tier 1 admin group, which is admin to the server. And this is also what we will exploit now. Yeah, this I don't need anymore. Let's clear this. So we will actually do exactly the same as before, just that this time we will not use responder to just look at the at the connections, but we will use NTLM relay X to relay it. So NTLM relay X, where do we want to relay? To this server, and yeah, we will need SMB2 support. And here on the left, we will actually do exactly the same. We will again coerce the domain controller to us. And after this happens, this NTLM relay will relay this connection to the server 1. This worked, and here on the right we can already see hashes because NTLM relay X by default does secret dump on the server, so basically dumps the hashes. Let's just try it out if it worked. Let's use WMI exec to connect to this server. Administrator at server. And just to prove to you, host name, who am I? So yeah, that is quite cool. We are was like 2 commands via local admin on this server. And yeah, let's see where we can go from here. We are local admin now. I told you we will be domain admin later on, so there is still 1 step missing, but we at least achieved this lateral movement. In the real world, of course, there might be hashes. On this server, it's really just I took the standard image, installed it. There's nothing installed. There's not one role. The only thing, only one thing is configured. More on this later. So in the real world, there might be hashes. Maybe there's even a domain admin hash if they work like this. So this can be quite bad. Yeah, next thing that we can exploit is Kerberos delegation. I guess most of you know Kerberos delegation. Just quick refresher if you don't. Generally, it works like this. We have a server here that we configure for Kerberos delegation. It's a web server in this case. And it is configured for Kerberos delegation, which means if a user connects to this web server can act, for example, on a database server in the backend as this user, basically making it a little bit easier, the authorization and everything. So if when this happens, the database server basically sees a connection by the user and gives it the privileges the user has. Problem is this, unconstrained delegation. If this is a domain admin, of course, again, web server can act as this database server as a domain admin. But if this web server is compromised in some way, if an attacker took it over as local admin there, they can also act as domain admin on the domain controller. Basically saying if this web server is taken over and the domain admin is connecting, the attacker on this web server now took over the domain controller. Yeah, so normally this is a little bit complicated, especially in a penetration test, something like this. If you don't have time, you would have to wait for an admin to connect there. You can write in the report unconstrained delegation is enabled, but yeah, it's not as much fun as if you can demonstrate that you can become domain admin. So the cool thing is Kerberos delegation also works with machine accounts. And as we saw before, we can coerce a machine account to connect back to us. How does this work? So we, again, ask the attacker, coerces the domain controller, in this case. So the attacker here is already admin to this server here, which has unconstrained delegation enabled, and the attacker coerces this domain controller to connect to this server. So it will use basically its Kerberos ticket to authenticate to the server. And in this case, the server has unconstrained delegation enabled, so this ticket can be forwarded. Because the attacker is admin to this server, they can steal the ticket, basically dump it from the else's process, and then use this ticket to log in to the domain controller. Not sure if we will see it in a second. So in our example, the server that we just took over has unconstrained delegation enabled. This is a screenshot from Bloodhound. We will see. So let's exploit this. Again, so what do? First of all, we have to tell the domain controller to connect to this server. So we will again use PetitPotam that in this case, this time, we will not tell the domain controller to connect to the server. In this case, we will tell the domain controller to connect to the server, not back to us, but directly to the server. So we will say target is server. No, the target of the coercion is the server. We will coerce this domain controller to connect to this server. The server should now have, the domain controller should now have connected to the server using a Kerberos ticket. We have to use full qualified domain names, else it doesn't work. And we should now be able to dump the else's process from this server and extract the tickets. Exactly this is what we will do. I like to use crackmap_exec here, basically connecting to the server with the user administrator, with the hash that we previously dumped. We'll do local auth, and we will run nanodump. Just one thing, in my tests, it sometimes didn't work, so I will, sometimes the ticket was not in the ELSA, so we will execute this PetitPotam a few times. So let me execute this, and so it's done. Let's see if it worked. So what happened here on the right is basically crackmap connected to the server, dumped the else's process, copied the dump to our temp folder, and we can now analyze it. In our case, we will do it with PyPyCats, so that we can also use Mimikatz, but PyPyCats we don't have to switch the machines. Comment is this. And yeah, we are only interested in the Kerberos tickets in this case. So we will dump the Kerberos tickets to a folder that I created before Kerberos, and we will dump the rest to def null. I already told you there are no hashes that are interesting on this machine, so we will just throw them away. So let's see if this worked. There should be... No, it's here actually. I don't know why this grab command didn't work, but okay. So this is the ticket we will need, and we can see it's in Kirby format. We have to convert it using ticket converter. Kerberos. Let me quickly copy this. So basically, we are converting this ticket from the Kirby format to the DC Zcash format, export it, basically tell the Kerberos implementation in Linux that to use this ticket, let's do klist. Looks good. Which date is it? Yeah, perfect. Should be valid till 9. Okay, let's see if it actually works. To do so, I will just use secret stamp from impacket, authenticate with Kerberos, just DCU, and we will in this case not really. We will just dump the hash of the KRB TGT user, so because we can use it to craft arbitrary tickets, and authenticate, of course, with the DC account to the domain controller. Yeah, so perfect, this worked. I mean, we could also dump other hashes. In this case, we have the KRB TGT users, so we can create golden tickets now. So I would say we are domain admin. Yeah, what is the countermeasure? It's quite obvious, constraint delegation. I guess most of you know about constraint delegation and anyways know that constraint delegation is the way to go, but at least I see it very often. There are one or two systems that do not have constraint delegation enabled, or that have constraint delegation enabled, but are allowed to delegate for a lot of machines. So constraint delegation is basically just, as a refresher, unconstrained delegation allows this web server to delegate for any machine, so it can delegate for the domain controller, it can delegate to the database server. Constrained delegation just implements a list that this computer is only trusted for delegation for this database server. It should basically mean an attacker could maybe take over this database server, not more. There are some other solutions that are common for this unconstrained delegation problem. Its account is sensitive and cannot be delegated. Or the protected user security group. Basically, account is sensitive and cannot be delegated is part of what the protected user security group does. Those are definitely good measures, and you should implement them for your users. But I haven't tried it myself, but I talked to a sysadmin who I'm quite sure knows what he does, and he said, yeah, I will not try to put machine accounts in the protected user security group. This will most probably break things, so this is not a good idea. So in this case, this doesn't really help. We really have to implement constraint delegation. Yeah, so what to do about it? There are some really easy countermeasures. This will be quick. But let's summarize the problem again. So we have a coercion technique that exploits a misconfiguration. Yeah, let's look into those two things. Coercion techniques, we have seen there are many, and they won't be fixed, so what should we do about it? Like at least as long as we are not Microsoft, at least. So this is most probably not where we want to start. We don't want to implement those measures around. We will maybe look into the misconfigurations. And you will see they are nothing new. Constraint delegation is one of them, nothing new. Those are well-established, good practices, and they also help against other attacks. Like this is, they are since a long time, since long before these coercion techniques existed. So this is where we start, and this is what I will show you in the next few slides. The most important one is this one here, SMB signing. In our case, it's not enabled. On the main controllers, it's enabled by default, but the server doesn't have it enabled. And basically, it protects against those medium attacks, whatever this abbreviation means nowadays. We should, by the way, come up with a new term for that. So one of the problems that it deals with is net and TLM relaying. Servers and clients should always require this SMB signing, especially the servers, of course. And the thing is, require SMB signing, because at least from the Nmap scans or Nessus scans, you can see that often the vulnerability there is signing enabled but not required. Of course, required is the way to go. Something I didn't talk about is resource-based delegation attacks. Against this, LDAP signing and channel binding helps, which is pretty much the same as SMB signing, just on LDAP. Unconstrained delegation, I already talked about it. Never use unconstrained delegation. Only, like, there are, of course, examples that the main controllers have to have it and it doesn't have any impact, but in general, always use constraint delegation. Audit local admin privileges is something that you most probably anyways do if you have some information security management system, but also look into machine accounts. Machine accounts can also be misconfigured, not only in our SCCM case, but it can also be that a machine account was accidentally moved in a group and has local admin privileges on another machine account. This should only be happening if absolute required, and SMB signing should be required. And how you can audit this, I showed you the Bloodhound Cypher query before. Maybe there are other tools as well. Yeah, network segregation is a big one, which is quite hard to implement, but of course it helps a lot against many attacks. And it's something that, yeah, if a customer of mine has network segregation in place, it makes attacks so much more harder. It's crazy. But yeah, many do not have it, or do not have it so well defined. Yeah, so and I promised you, are those new measures? LDAP channel binding is a little bit newer. The rest is at least 20 years old. And we should really think about implementing those, because I do not know why in 2023 I can still find so many systems that have SMB signing not enabled. I mean, I kind of know because they tell me why. It's because this specific service doesn't support SMB signing. But yeah, still, for me it doesn't make much sense. Look into those and really keep pressuring the people behind them so that you can enable that. Okay, let's summarize it up. We have waited, I think, long enough for Microsoft to fix this coercion stuff. And we waited some more, at least 5 years with this PrintBug. So I hope we are kind of here now, everybody. We kind of understand whether we are vulnerable. And we should really go back, implement those simple measures. We have seen them, they are old, and they should be supported nowadays. So yeah, let's do this. And thank you very much. If there are any questions, please go ahead.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? No questions? So everyone knows what to do?
Everybody wants to go to bed.
Yeah, everyone should enable SMB signing. So yeah.
Hello, great talk, thank you. You didn't mention the security measure about blocking and blocking, how it's called, blocking NTLM outgoing traffic from tier 0 servers. Is it because you had a lot of drawbacks in production or not?
The thing is, I haven't really seen it happening so far. Like, I talked to many admins that were saying they tried it out, it just didn't work yet. Like, they need it for so many use cases. So, but yes, it's definitely a good measure. Yeah. But I would have to look more into it. Like, I cannot tell you now like this. But yeah, the only thing that I know is that many admins told me, yes, it's something that you cannot really do nowadays. Whereas on the other hand, these measures are quite simple to implement.
Okay, then thanks again, Martin.
Thank you.